trigger shot, yeah.
Yeah. You're going American, my love.
Oh, a trigger injection. I always get told off for this one.
Yeah.
Trigger injection, which is a injection of a hormone called HCG, which essentially forces your follicles to mature your eggs that then in a natural cycle would lead to ovulation. In IVF, that's exactly what they're trying to do, but catch you just before ovulation. Which is why it's really, 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 really important that you take it at the time prescribed by your clinic, because everything will be based upon your HCG injection time. It has to be between 34 and 38 hours. And it is incredibly important for you to do that on time. But it's a single injection, and you will go into the clinic normally 34 hours after, 34 to 36 hours after the HCG injection. So, egg retrieval, the big day, isn't it?
The big day, absolutely.
Well, kind of, I guess implantation might be bigger.
Well, it depends on the way you look at it.
Yeah.
This is the day of the kind of the procedure.
Yeah. So you get admitted, don't you?
Yeah.
And men, make sure that you have this day off work, and if possible the next day as well, because you did need some support. You were very tired afterwards, and in fact you can't drive. It's an operation at the end of the day, so make sure that you do have the time off. But yeah, should we go through a little bit of the process? So this happens pretty quick actually. So you go into the clinic. Men, you get given a cup. And women, you get given a little card or
a wristband
or something that identifies you,
that says who you are.
And one thing I will say before we even get into it is, how many times do you reckon we were asked our identity to confirm it through the process? 10, 12?
Probably. It was very enthusiastically checked.
It's basically they want to make sure the right sperm and the right egg go together. So yeah, so make sure, no joking around on this bit, so make sure you get the right bit. So we got admitted, you had your blood pressure checked, your vitals taken, normal bits. You were asked about whether you're sick normally on anaesthetics, if you've had one before, because if you are, you can have what's called an antiemetic, which hopefully will stop you feeling sicky. Men, you are basically, this is all timed to perfection. So men, you'll get taken into a little side room.
Do your business.
Yep, you do your, we'll call it business, will we?
Oh,
there are magazines if you need some help. I won't go into my experience, which was challenging. So you get 45 minutes. It took me about 40 to get my sample. I have never felt so much pressure in my life. As Rachel's card explicitly said, the most important wank you'll ever have. Yeah, so be aware that even if you've had no issues before, the pressure can actually get to you. So yeah, so you do your sample. Yeah, put it into a little hatch and you push a button, and then the clinic take your sample.
Take it away.
And just as that's happened, you go, don't you?
Yeah. So before you go in, you'll change into one of those beautiful sexy gowns, ladies. Lovely ties at the back. All of that jazz, show your bum. You will have your wristband on, you'll have had your vitals taken, and they will have inserted a little tube into your hand or your arm called a cannula. It's a small prick with a needle, and then that needle comes out and the little tube remains in your hand.
That's a nice thing to call me.
Some days. So that will be in there, and that's the kind of where they'll give you drugs and things, give you anything they need to help calm you down, make sure you're not in pain, or like Nathan said, anything to stop you from feeling sick. So that will all be in there. You'll go into a sterile kind of room. You'll go over and confirm who you are again to the embryologist. So they usually have a little speaker intercom thing where you talk to the embryologist and tell them who you are and what your date of birth is and where you live and all that jazz.
How many were in the room?
Good question. Probably there was about 3 or 4 people in the room. So you've got, your nice bed that you lie down on. Usually kind of head end, you'll have, either like an anaesthetic doctor or an anaesthetic nurse. Mine was a nurse, an anaesthetic nurse. And they're the ones who'll give you kind of the drugs to settle you, and they'll be keeping an eye on your blood pressure, your heart rate and your oxygen levels through the procedure.
And you're completely awake, aren't you?
Completely awake is a kind of loose term. It depends on your reaction to the drugs. I was awake and to a certain point, and I was probably awake through the whole thing, but I don't remember it. Is probably more accurate. So you'll be awake, but you might not remember a lot of it.
So they give you a muscle relaxant, don't they?
They do. So what they give is it's kind of it's more a sedative. So the drugs they gave me was something called midazolam, which is like a sedative drug, and then fentanyl, which is an opioid painkiller. So they give you a painkiller and a sedative drug usually in combination. The type of drug that you're given, the name of it might be different, but that's the general type of drug you'll get given. Sometimes it might be morphine rather than fentanyl. But fentanyls they tend to give because it tends to make you less sicky. To be honest, it tends to make you less nauseous. Anyway, so you get those drugs, and you'll start to feel a bit woozy and a bit out of it. The doctor or the nurse doing the actual procedure at the bottom end, as it were, will be doing an ultrasound scan because they'll need to measure your cervical length, because this is when they get the measurement to know how far in they need to put the tube when they're going to transfer back your embryos later on. So they'll do that, and they'll get your legs in position. So there'll usually be the kind of doctor or nurse doing the procedure at the end, and then there'll be another nurse usually who's kind of positioning you, getting your legs into the right place, and what have you. The actual procedure itself I don't remember at all. I have no idea, but from research what I do know is that they basically then use an ultrasound probe to guide where they're going, and they put a needle through kind of
the wall of your vagina,
the wall of your vagina, and into each ovary in turn. And once they get into the ovary, they aspirate or they pull through the fluid out of each of the follicles, and that fluid will contain your eggs. And so they go through and systematically clear out every single follicle they can get to get as many eggs as possible. The bit I do then remember is being asked to move on to another bed. So at kind of that point, they said, can you get onto this bed? So I basically squished myself across. You don't have to stand up or anything. You literally just kind of shuffle your way across onto another bed. And I remember being wrapped up in lots of warm blankets and putting on my side and being taken through to the recovery area. Once I was there, a nurse quickly checked all my observations again, my blood pressure, heart rate, etc. And then they let you sleep, which is great.
And during this time, then you've got about 90 minutes to 2 hours where you're told just to go off and do whatever. I mean, I went and got a coffee, and I went out to buy Rachel something nice, and I ended up coming back with socks. And in fact, they weren't even socks, they were socks for me. I don't know why this happened, but just a bit of advice: don't do that.
Very disappointing.
Don't do that.
Very disappointing.
But yeah, and then you're allowed to go after about 2 hours, and they're happy with everything. You've had a bit of toast, you've gone for a wee, basically.
Yeah. So.
And then it's 24 hours rest.
You have to be able to eat, drink, be merry, and pee. And obviously, ideally, they don't want you in a lot of pain either. I felt absolutely fine immediately after both retrievals. I think each time the kind of discomfort hit me later on in the day, and then hopefully your lovely partner or whoever is going in with you will escort you home.
Yeah.
And then you can have a little rest. Oh, important though, before you leave, they will let you know how many eggs they did retrieve.
Yes, they do.
And you will have a quick discussion with the embryologist to say, usually to discuss your partner's sample, and to let you know if there are any issues with the sample itself.
They may use the ICSI if they have to at this stage.
We were in a position where they'd allocated enough time that they could either do standard IVF for us or ICSI, depending on Nathan's sample on the day. And luckily his sample was really good, so we just did IVF. Yeah. So they let us know that as well before we left.
So I mean, at that stage it becomes the lab. So we don't have anything to do. We go home, we rest. But in the lab, basically, in a normal IVF cycle, they put the sperm in with the eggs in a petri dish. They let them come together, fertilise naturally, In ICSI, they take a single sperm, they cut the tail off, they take it into an injection pipette, a micro pipette, and they inject it directly into the egg in order to fertilise. I mean, it's very detailed, but we won't go into any more detail than that. From there, you then get a phone call about 36 hours afterwards, wasn't it?
Yes, so the next morning we had a phone call to let us know how many of the eggs that they'd collected had fertilised. So for our first cycle, we had 7...
Collected.
No, 5 collected.
Yeah, and 5 fertilised.
And 5 fertilised.
Yeah.
So we found out the next day about that. And then the next contact you have is day 3, where they ring you and give you an update on your embryos. How are they looking? How many cells do they have? And they'll usually tell you at this point whether they want you to come in that day for a day 3 transfer, or whether they're happy to keep cooking them for another couple of days.
For day 5.
So transfer day. So you can have transfer either on day 3 or day 5 after your retrieval.
We had both, didn't we?
We did both, yeah. We did day 3 the first time, day 5 the second time. This will very much depend on the quality of your embryos, how they're growing, what your clinic's protocol is, and basically it all goes on your embryologist's advice.
In fact, I think it is important to state at the moment that in the UK, the HFEA have had a really heavy push on multiple pregnancies. As such, some clinics such as ours last year actually changed their protocol to actually not do day 3 implantation, only do day 5 implantation, didn't they?
Yeah.
So that was quite a tough change for us emotionally, because we knew that if they weren't developing very well on day 3, we still had to wait till day 5, which was quite difficult, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it can be a bit challenging if you're worried that you might not have any embryos at the end. But I mean, the majority of people, 95% of the time, will have an embryo at the end. And most clinics still will choose between a day 3 or day 5 transfer, but day 5 only transfers are becoming slightly more common.
But the process is the same, isn't it? Whether you
Yeah.
have a day 3 or a day 5.
Yeah.
And this day is, again, we said the last day was the big day, but I think emotionally this day is probably the biggest day, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do you want me to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah, go for it. Why not?
So you get called into the clinic, don't you? From there you get taken, you have to put on another lovely little gown, shoe covers.
We both get to do that.
We do, yeah. And men, you get to go into this one, which is actually really, really nice. So you go into a semi-sterile room. In the corner will be the embryologist sitting with a microscope in a little cabinet. And most clinics, in fact I would say all clinics this day and age, have a television monitor down there, or a computer screen in there, which means that you get to see an actual image of your blastocysts or embryos, depending on whether it's day 3 or day 5. So men, really important job for you this day is to get a really good photo. We named our first 2 MB1 and MB2, didn't we, for our day 3, and Blasty for our really, really, really unique names we gave them. But yeah, so we went in. Men, you have to stand or sit next to your partner's head, and the embryologist will show you your embryo. At that stage, they will have already taken the measurements of the womb, so they know exactly how far to pass the transfer catheter in. Essentially, they use a syringe attached to a transfer catheter. A transfer catheter is a long plastic tube. The embryo will be pulled into the transfer catheter. The catheter is then inserted into your vagina through the cervix
Via a speculum.
via a speculum. I was forgetting
Sorry,
about that
ladies.
wonderful
There is a
piece of
speculum
kit.
involved.
Into the right position in your uterus, and then essentially they're just injected into your uterus. The catheter is then removed, very carefully passed to the embryologist, who will then scan through the entire length of it using the microscope to make sure that the embryo has gone in, because they are sticky little devils, aren't they?
They are.
This whole process took 15 minutes, didn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't take very long at all. And probably the only other thing to say is there's usually, you and your partner and then 3 other people in the room. So there's the embryologist, there is usually the person who's doing the actual procedure, the transfer, which could be a doctor
assistant.
or could be a nurse, and then that she usually has a nurse who's assisting, who's just basically there to open any packets sterilely that they need, or get any equipment that they need in addition to what they'd already kind of set out.
That really, in a nutshell, is the IVF process.
Yeah.
It takes about, I would have said on average, about 12 to 13 weeks to get to this point. For some people it might be 14, 15, but the average is around 13 weeks, which I guess is quarter of a year, so it's nothing to be sniffed at.
No, it will really depend on your clinic though, and kind of the waiting times and all of this. Like I said, we were very lucky. We hit summer. They weren't doing as many, cycles because people were delaying because of going on summer holidays and things.
And from the start of drugs all the way through to the end,
it's 7 weeks.
It's about 7 weeks, isn't it?
So it's about 5 weeks up until your retrieval, and then there's a couple of weeks after retrieval.
Yeah. So after that, you obviously go into the dreaded, what is termed in the conceiving world as the 2-week wait.
Yeah.
And the 2-week wait isn't actually a 2-week wait in IVF.
No.
It's about, if you have a day 5, it's a 9-day wait. If you have a day 3, it's an 11-day wait. So we have both again.
Yeah.
But it's the same principle, and in fact I think it's actually sometimes harder because an embryo that has been fertilised is inside. And it's important to keep your mind occupied, rest when you need to, and all of those things.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that, this part does again depend upon the clinic. Some clinics get you to only do a home test, but the majority of clinics do now get you in to have what's called a beta test, which measures the drug that we talked about earlier, HCG, because when the embryo implants into the uterus, the development of the placental cells releases HCG in essence, and that becomes detectable 14 days post-ovulation, which is 9 days post 5-day transfer or whatever. But yeah, you get the point. So at that point they can clinically detect pregnancy.
Yeah.
And in that blood test they are looking for a result over 50. A result over 50 means you are pregnant. A result under 5 means you're not pregnant. Unfortunately, there is also this grey area, which is between 5 and
50.
About 49.9, yeah. It's inconclusive, so they can't say you're pregnant, they can't say you aren't pregnant. So what they will often do in that is they'll get you in 2 days later, and what they're looking for with that is that your HCG level has gone up between 50 and 100% in that 48-hour period, and that'll then determine whether you're pregnant or not. And the reason for that is that there is a huge range. At the point you're pregnant, at that stage, at that blood test, you're 4 weeks. And at 4 weeks, the range of normal HCG levels in pregnancy is 5 to 438 in the units that they use, which is basically standard units per milliliter. But yeah, so you can see there is a huge, almost 100x range there. So just because you've got between 5 and 50, don't get your hopes. Don't feel crushed, because it can still have a positive outcome.
Yeah.
But also on the flip side, be aware there are things like chemical pregnancies that can happen in this period, and they can be indicative. And then the only other thing to mention is if you have a super high result, that can sometimes be indicative of twins or an ectopic pregnancy. So if you do have a very high result, they'll obviously pick up those things at the 7-week scan that you have. But yeah, once you've had that blood test and it's confirmed either way, that really is the end of the process.
It is.
Isn't it?
And the only other thing I think we've actually forgot to mention is when you, after your egg retrieval, you will start on a progesterone medication. Usually it is a suppository or a pessary. And your clinic will usually have a preference on where you insert it. I think a lot of clinics will go for the pessary version, although it's actually the same drug, so you could choose yourself where you want to put it, but I'm going to guess that most people would rather put it up their vagina than do it up the bum.
No comment.
But it really depends on your preference and what your clinic's preference is. Some ladies will actually go on to progesterone in oil, which is an IM, so an intramuscular injection. But again, that will be something that your clinic and you will decide on together. The idea of the progesterone is it's basically preparing your uterus for implantation, and it's supporting your pregnancy.
Yeah, it does. Helps sustain
For
it,
those,
doesn't it?
helps sustain it for those first, 2 weeks. So that's kind of the other and the problem with progesterone, unfortunately, ladies, is it makes you feel like you're pregnant,
It does.
which is great.
Which doesn't help with the symptoms
Which really
that go on in
doesn't
the 2
help.
weeks. Am I pregnant? Am I not? Oh, I've got this symptom.
Yeah.
Could be the progesterone, could be pregnancy. It's really
So
complex, isn't
you
it?
will probably have cramps, hot flushes, nausea, any of those kind of things that you would generally associate with a positive pregnancy test. But you can have it either way. I suffered with it both times, with both my negative and my positive. And I wouldn't have said the symptoms were any stronger either time. So unfortunately, you have to kind of deal with a bit of a
You do.
mind-bending annoyance that is those symptoms, and kind of I spent a lot of time sitting down and rationalising with myself that
And
it
Googling.
wasn't, and Googling.
Does this mean I'm pregnant? Does this not mean I'm pregnant?
Yeah.
We've all done that.
Oh no, Google, don't Google. Google is bad.
No, Google is good.
Google is good, but try not to obsess. Try not to. I did. It wasn't good. But yeah,
That's the end of it, really,
that's
isn't it, for IVF? So if you've got any comments or any questions, just pop them down in the comments section. We'll be happy to answer anything, really, won't we? We're not shy about coming forwards. We like to talk about our experience, or even if they're just specific questions about any section of the process. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button if you did.
Yeah,
we are a new
please.
channel, so we're trying to build it slowly, aren't we?
Yep. So
And
every little helps.
Absolutely. So thanks for your time and have a fab day.
See you later.